"We know it was you who took the $30,000, my dad said as my family blocked the door. My sister was crying, saying her wedding fund was gone. I just stood there. Then I pulled out my phone, opened the transfer logs, and set a trap they never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments." The flu had settled deep in my bones, a miserable, aching chill that left me weak and wrapped in 3 layers of blankets. I was on my 3rd day of sick leave, my head pounding, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly chime. It was a series of sharp, angry jabs that echoed the throbbing in my temples. I shuffled to the door, my throat raw, and peered through the peephole. My father, Frederick, my mother, Alina, and my sister, Caroline, huddled between them, her face buried in her hands. A jolt of panic, sharper than the fever, shot through me. "What's wrong?" I croaked, fumbling with the deadbolt. "Is everyone okay?" The moment the door opened, they didn't just enter, they invaded. My father's face was a mask of cold fury, his jaw set. My mother, Alina, swept past me, her eyes scanning my living room as if looking for something. Caroline, as always, was the center of the drama, sobbing uncontrollably. "What's going on?" I asked again, my voice barely a whisper. I clutched my robe tighter, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. "Don't play dumb, Alice," my father snapped. His voice was not his own. It was a cold, accusatory boom that rattled me. "We know what you did." I blinked, confused. My flu-addled brain couldn't keep up. What I did, Dad, I'm sick. I have no idea what you're talking about." "The money, Alice," my mother's voice was sharp. "The $30,000, it's gone." Caroline let out a wail. "My wedding fund, it's all gone. Stephen and I, we have to cancel everything." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen, but there was something in them that wasn't just grief. It was an accusation. I stared at her, then at my parents. They had positioned themselves in my small foyer, effectively blocking the door. They were looking at me with a uniform expression of disgust. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, my own anger starting to cut through the feverish haze. "We know it was you," my father said, stepping closer. "Caroline said you were the only other person who knew the password to the joint account. She said you were jealous, that you never wanted her to be happy." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jealous? I was the one who helped her set up the budget. I was the one who listened to her endless complaints about venues and caterers. I was her maid of honor. What?" I stammered. "You think I stole $30,000 from my own sister?" "It all adds up," Caroline cried, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're the accountant, Alice. You know how to move things around. You're sick, so you're not at work. You probably thought you could take it and no one would notice until it was too late. You hate Stephen, you always have." "That is not true," I said, my voice rising. "Stop lying," my father roared. "Your mother and I are ashamed. We raised you to be better than this. You will return every single cent of that money, or we are calling the police." I stood there, surrounded. My family, the people who were supposed to love me, were standing in my home, calling me a thief. My sister, who I had protected my entire life, was weeping crocodile tears, her lies hanging in the air like poison. I looked at their faces, one by one, my father's righteous anger, my mother's bitter disappointment, my sister's carefully crafted victimhood. The fever, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all, it coalesced into a single, cold point of clarity. I saw exactly what was happening, and they had made one very critical mistake. They had forgotten who I was. I held up a hand. "Okay," I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear. The sickness, the weakness, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They stared, surprised by my sudden change. "You want to see where the money went?" I asked. "I'll show you." I turned, walked to my desk, and picked up my phone. My hands weren't even shaking. I pulled up the banking app, my thumb hovering over the transfer logs. They thought they had cornered me. They thought I was a thief. They had no idea. The betrayal was worse than the sickness itself. The silence in the room was thick and heavy, broken only by Caroline's performative sniffles. My parents watched me, their arms crossed, a jury that had already delivered its verdict. They expected a confession. They expected me to break down, beg for forgiveness, and promise to repay the money I hadn't taken. "Alice, this is your last chance," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Just tea. Alice, the truth." I looked up from my phone, my eyes locking onto his. "I'm about to," I said. I turned back to Caroline. "So the $30,000 is just gone, vanished from the account?" She nodded, wiping at her dry eyes. "Yes, I checked this morning to pay the deposit for the reception hall, and it was empty. I called the bank, and they said the funds were transferred out over the last 3 weeks. To an account they couldn't trace. You hid it, didn't you? Like you do for your clients." Her words were so specific, so rehearsed. To an account they couldn't trace. A nice touch. It was meant to sound plausible to my parents, who knew I was a forensic accountant but didn't truly understand what I did. They just knew it was complicated and involved hiding assets for corporations during audits. The implication was clear. I had the skills to make $30,000 disappear. "An untraceable account," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. I kept my expression neutral. "And the bank confirmed this." "Yes," she insisted. "They said it was a complex series of digital transfers. See, Dad, she's the only one who could do that." My mother, Alina, shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin, disappointed line. "Alice, your sister is devastated. Her wedding is in 2 months. How could you?" I looked at my family, truly looked at them. For my entire life, Caroline had been the fragile one, the one who needed protecting. And I had been the responsible one, the one who cleaned up her messes. From high school detentions to a fender bender she'd tried to hide, I was the one who handled it. And this was the thanks I got. They were so quick to believe her, so eager to see me as the villain. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just about money. It was about my entire life, my entire position in this family. I took a deep breath, the air still rattling in my flu-congested lungs. "Okay," I said again. I tapped my phone screen a few times, pulling up the secure file I had started building 3 weeks ago. "You're right about one thing, the money is gone, and I do know where it went." Caroline's breath hitched. For the first time, a flicker of genuine panic flashed in her eyes. "But," I continued, "before I show you, I have a question for you, Caroline." "What?" she snapped, her victim mask slipping. "How is Stephen?" I asked, my voice polite, almost conversational. "He must be heartbroken. He worked so hard for his share of that money, all that overtime tutoring." Stephen was a good man, a high school history teacher who genuinely loved his job and genuinely loved my sister. He was kind, patient, and utterly blind to her faults. He had worked 2 extra jobs for the last year to save his half of the wedding fund, which they'd put into that joint account. At the mention of his name, Caroline's face hardened. "Don't you dare talk about him. You're the one who's destroying our future." "Am I?" I murmured. I looked down at my phone screen, at the neat columns and digital receipts I had been quietly collecting. It had started as a suspicion, a weird little charge I'd noticed when helping her budget. A single boutique purchase for $1,500 that she'd brushed off as a gift from a friend. But accountants are, by nature, suspicious. I had kept an eye on it, and that one little thread had unraveled the entire tapestry. They had all forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that my job isn't just about hiding money. It's about finding it. "Dad," I said, turning to him. "Mom, you are accusing me of grand larceny. You are threatening to call the police. You are taking her word over mine without a single shred of proof." "Her devastation is all the proof I need," my father thundered. "Right," I said. I held up my phone. "Then you won't mind looking at my proof." I could feel the shift in the room. The absolute certainty of my parents was beginning to crack, replaced by a new, unsettling confusion. Caroline, however, just looked angry. She had miscalculated. She thought I was too sick, too weak, too loyal to fight back. She thought she could pin this on me and I would just take it like I always had. She was wrong. This wasn't the first time Caroline had lied, but it was certainly the most ambitious. My sister had always lived in a world where consequences were for other people. I, on the other hand, had built my entire life on facts, figures, and accountability. Growing up, I was the smart one. Caroline was the pretty one. While I was in the library, she was at parties. When I was saving for a down payment on my condo, she was leasing a luxury car she couldn't afford. My parents, Frederick and Alina, enabled it every step of the way. "Oh, that's just Caroline," my mother would say with a sigh, as if her recklessness was a charming, unchangeable quirk. And I, like a fool, had propped up the facade. I cosigned for that car lease. I loaned her money for rent more tea. Imez than I could count, knowing I'd never see it again. I did it because, deep down, I loved her, and I thought that's what big sisters were for. I was her safety net, and she had just tried to set that net on fire with me still in it. The betrayal wasn't just Caroline's, it was my parents'. They had known me for 32 years. They knew my character. They knew I was meticulous, responsible to a fault, and would rather eat glass than be in debt, let alone steal. Yet here they were, in my home, their faces rigid with accusation. "You've always been jealous of her, Alice," my mother said, her voice quiet but cutting. "She's free-spirited. She's found a wonderful man and she's happy. You have your career." The way she said career made it sound like a consolation prize. As if my years of education, my six-figure salary, and my professional reputation were just things I'd collected to make up for not being as happy as Caroline. "This isn't about jealousy, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously level. "This is about $30,000. I looked back at Caroline, who was now staring at my phone as if it were a bomb. The antagonist in this story wasn't just my sister. It was the lifetime of enabling from my parents that had created her. They had coddled her, bilaid her out, and praised her for mediocrity, all while holding me to an impossible standard of perfection. And now, they had to face the monster they had created. Caroline's fiancé, Stephen, was the real victim here besides me. He was a genuinely decent person, a teacher, patient and kind, who saw Caroline as this vibrant, exciting woman. He had no idea she was a black hole of entitlement and debt. He had worked tirelessly, saving every extra penny from his tutoring gigs to build a future with her. He deserved to know who he was marrying. "So, Caroline," I started, turning the screen of my phone so only she could see it for a moment. Her eyes widened and all the color drained from her face. I'd opened the first file, a screenshot of a transaction from 3 weeks ago. "You said the bank couldn't trace the transfers," I said, my voice loud enough for my parents to hear. "That's interesting, because I had no trouble at all. You're still using the same joint checking account I helped you set up, right? The one linked to your personal savings account for overdraft protection." She was pale, silent. "You see," I explained to my parents, who were now watching me with growing apprehension, "when you link accounts like that, it leaves a very clear, very simple digital breadcrumb trail. Not complex at all. In fact, it's the kind of trail a first-year accounting intern could spot in 5 minutes." I turned the phone around for my parents to see. "Here," I said, pointing, "is a $2,500 transfer from the wedding fund to Caroline's personal savings. And here, just 2 hours later, is a $2,500 charge to a designer handbag website. Does that name look familiar, Mom? I believe you admired her new gift just last week." My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father squinted at the screen. That's a coincidence," Caroline stammered, her voice shaking. I must have paid a bill from the wrong account. It was a mistake." "A $2,500 mistake?" I asked. "Interesting. Then I suppose this $1,800 transfer, followed by an $1,800 charge to Desert Sun Spa and Wellness, was also a mistake. And this one's my favorite." I swiped to the next file, A $4,000 transfer, followed by 4 separate charges of $1,000 each to, what's this? Coachella Valley Music Festival. Tickets for you and your friends, I assume, since I know Stephen was grading midterms that weekend. Caroline was no longer crying. She was glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You've been spying on me. No, I said, my voice like ice. You tried to frame me for grand larceny. I'm just your forensic accountant, and right now I'm conducting an audit. The shift in the room was palpable. The air crackled with a new, awful tension. My father, who had been so sure, so full of righteous fury, now looked utterly lost. He stared at the phone, then at Caroline, then back at the phone. My mother simply sank onto the arm of my sofa, her face ashen. Caroline, my father said, his voice a hoarse whisper. What is this? Tell me this isn't true. Caroline, cornered, did what she always did. She attacked. She's faking it, she shrieked, lunging for my phone. I snatched it back, holding it out of her reach. She's an accountant. She's photoshopping it. She's trying to frame me because she's jealous. She's always been jealous. Photoshop? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that hurt my raw throat. Caroline, this is a live look at your bank statements. The ones you gave me access to when you begged me to help you budget. You just forgot I still had that password. The same way you forgot I'd see the alerts for unusual transfer activity. This was the cleave. Our trap, it wasn't some complex legal maneuver. It was simply her own laziness and my own meticulous nature. When I'd helped her and Stephen set up their finances, I had insisted on linking all their accounts to a single financial dashboard app. It was the only way, I'd argued, to get a clear picture of their spending habits. She had agreed, eager for me to do the hard work of managing it all. She never once thought to revoke my access. She never thought I'd be looking. I hadn't been, not really. But 3 weeks ago, the app had sent me a push notification. A large transfer of $2,500 has occurred in the wedding fund account. I'd texted her, and she'd replied, "Oh, just paying the florist's deposit. TA checks for checking." I'd thought nothing of it until I'd seen the florist's actual invoice on her kitchen counter a few days later for only $500. A small lie, but it had made me curious. So I'd logged in, and I hadn't just looked, I had investigated. I'd spent the last 3 weeks, in my spare time, building a complete file. I had cross-referenced every single transfer from the wedding fund with her personal debit card purchases. I had pulled the digital receipts. I had created a perfect, itemized list of her entire secret spending spree. "You're not just a thief, Caroline," I said, my voice low and steady. "You're a bad one." I swiped again. A $3,000 transfer, followed by a down payment on a luxury car lease. Not the sensible one Stephen picked out, but the upgraded model with the leather interior. Swipe, a $1,200 transfer. A girls' weekend at a vineyard. Swipe, another $2,000, designer shoes, a new laptop, a high-end espresso machine. With every swipe, Caroline grew smaller, and my parents' horror grew larger. It wasn't just the $30,000, was it, Caroline? I continued, my professional detachment fully in place. That's just what Stephen contributed. You also spent the $15,000 our parents gave you, and the $5,000 from Stephen's parents. I've tracked a total of $52,000 in expenditures from that account in the last 6 months, all on yourself. The wedding fund wasn't just gone. It's been gone for a while. You just needed a scapegoat before Stephen found out. No, my mother whispered, her hand over her heart. Frederick, she wouldn't. Oh, she would, I said. And she did, and the worst part. I saved the last, most damning piece of evidence. The untraceable account you mentioned, the one you told them the bank couldn't find, you were right in a way. It's not a bank. It's an offshore sports betting site. You didn't just spend the money, Caroline, you gambled it, and lost. The luxury items were just to make you feel better about the thousands you were throwing away every week. My father looked like he was going to be sick. Alice, stop, he pleaded. No, I said. You came into my home, you called me a thief, you threatened me, you are going to hear all of it. I turned back to my sister. Her face was a terrifying blank mask. The game was up and she knew it. She stammered. "You have a problem, Caroline," I said, finally putting the phone down. "A massive one. And you were willing to destroy my life, my reputation, and my relationship with our family to hide it. You were going to let me go to jail." The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of my refrigerator. "Well," I said, walking to my couch and collapsing into it, the fever and adrenaline warring within me. "What happens now?" My father, Frederick, was the first to move. He didn't look at me. He walked stiffly, like an old man, and stood directly in front of his youngest daughter. "Caroline," he said, and his voice was unrecognizable. All the bluster and rage were gone, replaced by a hollow, brittle sound. "Is it true, all of it?" Caroline, with no escape, burst into tears. But these were not the fake sobs from 30 minutes ago. These were the racking, ugly, panicked gasps of someone who had been caught. I didn't mean to," she cried, collapsing against him. It just got out of control, the wedding. It was so stressful and I just needed a little something for myself. And then I lost some money and I thought I could win it back. I was going to pay it all back, I swear." It was a pathetic, textbook confession. My father, a man who had prized family honor above all else, looked like his world was ending. He didn't embrace her. He just stood there, letting her sob against his chest, his own hands limp at his sides. My mother, Alina, was a different story. She rose from the sofa and walked over to me. I tensed, expecting another accusation or perhaps a plea to fix this, to keep it quiet. Instead, she just looked at me, her eyes filled with a dawning horror. "Alice, you knew this for 3 weeks." "I suspected," I corrected her, my voice weary. "I confirmed it all over the past few days. I was trying to figure out how to tell." "Stephen, how to tell you, I never imagined she would do this, that she would try to frame me." "Why didn't you say anything?" my mother whispered, her own tears starting to fall. Why did you let us accuse you?" "You didn't let me do anything, Mom," I said, the old resentment flaring. "You didn't ask me if I did it. You told me I did. You came in here with Dad and the liar-in-chief, and you threatened me. You gave me no choice." My words, sharp and true, hung in the air. My mother flinched, recognizing the truth. She had been so ready to believe the worst of me, the responsible one, and the best of Caroline, the reckless one. "But your sister," she stammered, looking back at the weeping mess in my father's arms. "She needs help." "She needs help," I agreed, my voice hard. "But before she gets help, she has to face the consequences. She didn't just steal money, Mom. She tried to ruin me." "What are we going to do?" my father asked, his voice shaking. He finally pushed Caroline away from him, holding her at arm's length. "Stephen? Oh, goodness, Stephen." As if summoned, my phone, still on the coffee table, buzzed. We all jumped. It was a text from Stephen. "Hey, Alice, at the florist. They said the deposit was never paid. Caroline isn't answering her phone. Is everything okay?" I picked up the phone. Caroline's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. "He's at the florist," I announced to the room. "He knows the deposit wasn't paid. He's wondering where his fiancée is." "Don't," Caroline shrieked, making another move for the phone. "Don't you dare, Alice, you'll ruin my life." "You did that yourself," I said, standing up. The fever was roaring back, making me dizzy, but I stood my ground. "He deserves to know. He deserves to know exactly who he is about to marry." "No," she screamed. "Please, Alice, I'll pay it back. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. Just please don't tell him he'll leave me." "He should leave you," I said, my voice as cold as the grave. "He's a good man. He doesn't deserve to be tied to a compulsive liar and a thief with a gambling addiction." I started to type a reply. "Hi, Stephen, you need to come to my apartment. Right now, it's about Caroline." No, please." Caroline was hysterical, grabbing at my arm. I shook her off, a wave of disgust rolling through me. "Dad," I said, looking him in the eye, "control your daughter." My father looked at Caroline, at her tear-streaked, makeup-smeared, terrified face. And for the first time in my life, I saw the blind adoration in his eyes die. It was replaced by something cold, something broken. He grabbed Caroline's arm. "Stop it, Caroline, just stop." I hit send. A new text from Stephen came in almost immediately. "On my way, 10 minutes. "He'll be here in 10 minutes, I said to my family. "I suggest you all sit down, because this is going to be the most honest family discussion we have ever had." The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Caroline slumped into a chair, her face pale and vacant, the fight completely gone. My father paced the length of my small living room, his hands behind his back, looking like a man trapped. My mother just sat, twisting her wedding ring, her eyes fixed on the front door. I remained on the sofa, my phone in my lap, the full, finalized spreadsheet of Caroline's theft open and waiting. When the doorbell rang, it was a quiet, polite chime. So different from the angry summons that had started this nightmare. I stood and opened the door. Stephen was standing there, his face etched with concern. "Alice, are you okay? You look terrible, and my text, 'What's going on? Is Caroline okay?'" I'm fine, Stephen, just the flu," I said, my voice hoarse. I stepped back. "Please come in, everyone is here." His smile faltered as he stepped inside and saw the scene. He saw Frederick, pale and grim. He saw Alina, red-eyed and shrinking into the sofa. And he saw his fiancée, Caroline, looking like she'd just seen a ghost. What's happening?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. "Caroline, honey, why are your parents here? Why is everyone crying?" Caroline wouldn't look at him. She just stared at her hands. "Stephen," my father said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Stephen, son, there's something you need to know." "Dad, don't," Caroline whispered, a final, desperate plea. "Be quiet, Caroline," my father snapped, the anger returning, but this time it was aimed at the right person. Stephen looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "Alice." I held up my phone. I couldn't do it slowly this time. I couldn't draw it out. This man's life was about to be detonated, and he deserved the simple, terrible truth. "Stephen," I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "You've been working 2 jobs to save for this wedding, haven't you?" "Yes," he said, his confusion deepening. "For the last year, we saved $30,000. Why?" "That money is gone, Stephen," I said. "All of it. And so is the $15,000 my parents gave you. And the $5,000 your parents gave you. It's all gone." Stephen just stared at me. What do you mean gone? Caroline said she paid the florist." "No, wait, she didn't. That's why I'm here. Was the account hacked?" "No," I said. I stepped forward and handed him my phone. "It wasn't hacked." He took it, his brow furrowed, and he began to read. I watched his face as he scrolled through the itemized list I had prepared. I watched his eyes move from the wedding fund transfer column to the purchase column. I watched him read. $2,500, designer handbag. $1,800, spa and wellness package. $4,000, Coachella tickets. $3,000, luxury auto lease down payment. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to a sickening, dawning comprehension. He scrolled and scrolled, his hand starting to shake. He saw the dates, the times, the sheer volume of it. He saw the transfers to the offshore betting sites. He saw the entire, ugly, selfish truth laid out in neat, undeniable columns. When he finally looked up, his face was white. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my parents. He looked at the woman he was supposed to marry in 2 months. "Caroline," he whispered. His voice was a broken thing. "Coachella, I thought your friends paid for you. You told me it was a birthday present." "Stephen, baby, I can explain," Caroline said, finally standing up, her hands outstretched. "Explain what?" he asked, his voice getting louder. "Explain the car, the one you told me was a company bonus, or the spa days, or the betting." He held up the phone, his hand trembling with rage. You've been gambling with our money, with my parents' money. I was going to win it back, she shrieked, her own defense. I was just stressed. This wedding, it's all too much. Stressed, he yelled, and I'd never heard Stephen raise his voice before. You were stressed. So you stole from me? You stole from my parents? I've been working 70-hour weeks, Caroline. I've been grading papers until 2 a.m. I sold my car, the one I loved, so we could have a better honeymoon. And you were buying handbags. I love you, she sobbed, trying to clutch his arm. He ripped his arm away as if her touch had burned him. Love me? You don't even know what that means. He looked at her, and all the love in his eyes, the deep, patient, unconditional love he had always shown her, just vanished. It was gone, replaced by a cold, devastating emptiness. You let me. You were going to marry me, he stammered, the realization hitting him. You were going to walk down that aisle, knowing you had stolen everything from us, from me. He turned to me and handed me my phone. Thank you, Alice, he said, his voice flat. I'm sorry they did this to you. I'm so sorry, Stephen, I whispered. He nodded, then turned back to Caroline. My parents were frozen, watching the destruction of their daughter's future in real time. We're done, Caroline, he said. No, Stephen, please, we can fix this. Fix what? He asked, his voice hollow. Fix the lies, fix the theft, fix, you know I'm done. He walked over to her. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stood in front of her, and with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached for her left hand. He slid the engagement ring off her finger. It had been his grandmother's. He held it in his palm for a moment, looking at it. Then he closed his fist, put his hand in his pocket, and turned around. Stephen, wait, my father called out. Stephen paused at the door, his back to us. Don't, Frederick, just, don't, you should get her some help. And with that, he opened the door and walked out, closing it quietly behind him. 10 minutes after he'd arrived, her fiancé was gone. The silence that followed the click of the closing door was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and life out of the room. Caroline just stared at the door, her left hand still raised, her finger bare. Then she let out a sound. It was not a cry of sadness or remorse. It was a low, animalistic wail of pure rage. You, she screamed, her head snapping toward me. You did this. You ruined my life. You were always jealous, always. You couldn't stand to see me happy. She lunged at me, her hands clawed. She was aiming for my face. Caroline, no, my father shouted, grabbing her from behind in a bear hug, pinning her arms. He was stronger than I'd thought. He physically dragged her back as she kicked and screamed, a child in a full-blown tantrum. I hate you, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I wish you were dead. The words hit me, but I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, my arms crossed, feeling the fever pulsing in my veins. Happy, Caroline? I asked. You call tea. Happy, lying to everyone, stealing from the man you supposedly love, that's not happiness, that's a sickness. Stop it, both of you, my mother cried, finally breaking. She was sobbing into her hands. My family, it's broken. Your family has been broken for a long time, Mom, I said, my voice weary. You just didn't want to see it. You wanted the perfect picture, and you were willing to let Caroline destroy me to keep it. My father, still restraining Caroline, looked at me over her head. His face was a ruin of shame and regret. Alice, she's right, this is our fault. We spoiled her. We never made her face this. Caroline's rage suddenly collapsed, and she went limp in his arms, her sobs turning to pathetic whimpers. I want to go home. Daddy, please. I just want to go home. My father let her go. She crumpled to the floor, a heap of expensive clothes and ruined dreams. My parents looked at each other. The public, or at least semi-public, showdown was over. Stephen was gone, the truth was out, and all that was left was the wreckage. What happens now? My mother asked me, as if I had the answers. As if I was, once again, the one who had to fix it. I shook my head. I don't know, I said. That's not up to me. I walked to my desk, picked up my laptop, and brought it back to the coffee table. I opened it and pulled up a new file. "What's that?" my father asked, his voice wary. "It's a list," I said, turning the screen so they could all see it. A list of inpatient treatment centers for gambling addiction, and a few for compulsive lying and personality disorders. I've also taken the liberty of scheduling a consultation with a lawyer I know, a friend who specializes in embezzlement. Caroline's head shot up. "A lawyer? You're sending me to jail." "I'm not," I said. "But Stephen might. He has every right to. He and his parents can and should press charges. You committed fraud, this file I built. It's not just for the family. It's a complete criminal case ready to be handed to the police." "Alice, no, you can't," my mother pleaded. "She's your sister." "And I was her sister when she tried to send me to jail?" I shot back. "She needs to understand the gravity of what she's done. This isn't high school. This isn't a fender bender. This is a crime. A serious, life-altering crime." I looked at Caroline, who was staring at the laptop screen in horror. "This is your choice," I said to her, my voice calm. "Option A, you tell Stephen you are willing to face the legal consequences. You sign a legally binding repayment plan for every cent you stole, and you check yourself into one of these treatment facilities. Today." "Or," she whispered. "Or option B," I said, my finger hovering over the trackpad. "I email this entire file, the bank statements, the transfer logs, the betting receipts, all of it, to Stephen, his parents, and the local district attorney's office. And I let the justice system handle it. I'm sick. I'm tired. And I am done protecting you. You have 60 seconds to decide." My parents stared at me, shocked by my cold decisiveness. But I meant every word. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about the definitive, triumphant action that would finally break my sister's spell over this family. Caroline looked at my father. "Daddy." My father looked at me, then back at her, and he shook his head. "Alice is right, Caroline. We can't help you this time. You have to choose." The seconds ticked by. Caroline's face contorted as she realized, finally, that the walls were a LL the way in. There was no escape hatch. There was no mommy and daddy to fix it. There was only the consequence. "Okay," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, I'll do it. Option A, please, Alice. Just don't send that file." I looked at her for a long, hard moment. Then I closed the laptop. "Get your things," my father said to her, his voice devoid of all emotion. We'll drive you to the first place on that list." The downfall was as swift as it was total. My father, true to his word, drove Caroline to an inpatient treatment facility that very afternoon. It was a 90-day program 3 states away. There were no negotiations. My mother, in a daze, packed her a bag. The next day, I called Stephen. I was still sick, but my head was clear. I met him for coffee, my laptop in my bag. I told him what had happened after he left, and I told him about Caroline's choice. "She's in treatment," I explained. "And my parents and I have already spoken to their lawyer. They're liquidating a stock portfolio to pay you and your parents back immediately. All $35,000. It should be in your account by the end of the week." Stephen just stared into his mug. He looked tired, but the raw pain in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, sad resolve. "Thank you, Alice," he sighed. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I said. "This is what accountability looks like." I pushed the laptop across the table. "This is the full file I prepared. It's yours. You can still press charges. No one would blame you." He looked at the laptop, then back at me. Is she really getting help?" "I think so," I said honestly. "I think she finally hit a bottom she couldn't lie her way out of." He nodded slowly. "Then I don't want to press charges. Her being away and me getting my family's money back, that's enough. I just want to move on." He pushed the laptop back to me. "I don't need to see that again. I trust you." The reconciliation with my parents was harder. They came over a week later, after Caroline was settled and the money had been transferred to Stephen. They stood in the same foyer where they had accused me. Alice, my father began, his eyes on the floor. There is no excuse for what we did. We failed you. As parents, we failed you. We were so blind, my mother added, her voice thick with tears. We were so desperate to believe the fantasy Caroline was selling that we were willing to sacrifice the truth. We were willing to sacrifice you, and I will never, ever forgive myself for that. I had been prepared for more excuses, more justifications. But this was raw, honest remorse. And I saw two elderly people, not as my infallible parents, but as flawed humans who had made a terrible, terrible mistake. It will take time, I said, my voice quiet. A long time, for me to trust you again. We know, my father said, finally meeting my gaze. We'll do whatever it takes. We're starting therapy, family counseling for us to understand how we let this happen. That, more than anything, was the start. Caroline's treatment was not a magic fix. She was there for the full 90 days, and when she got out, she didn't move back in with my parents. She moved into a sober living halfway house and got a job at a coffee shop. I saw her at a family therapy session 6 months later. She was quiet, humbled, and for the first time in her life, she looked me in the eye and said, "I am so sorry, Alice. I was a monster. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to you, and to Stephen." I simply nodded. The apology was not for me to accept, not yet. It was for her to live. As for me, I took a long overdue vacation. I went to Italy for 3 weeks, ate pasta, and didn't look at a single spreadsheet. When I came back, my relationship with my parents had a new, fragile honesty. We talked, really talked for the first time. The antagonist, my sister, was not in jail. But she was facing the consequences in her own way, in a life she had to rebuild from ashes, with no safety net. Justice had been served. And as I sat in my quiet, peaceful apartment, my health returned and my integrity intact, I finally felt a sense of vindication. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.